My son Ethan will inherit it all. The company, the estate, the jet, my father declared, lifting his glass high as though he were crowning a king. Applause thundered through the ballroom, guests cheering, as Ethan soaked in every ounce of the spotlight. I sat frozen, the laughter and clinking glasses blurring into a single hum in my head. Then my father turned toward me. His voice cut through the noise, low and venomous. "And Daniel, you get nothing. You should never have been born." The room went still, the air tight with shock, until the laughter started again, rolling through the crowd like a cruel wave. People chuckled as if my father's hatred was a joke to be shared. Ethan leaned back in his chair, grinning wide, while my mother stared down at her wine, refusing to meet my eyes. I pushed back my chair, the scrape of wood against marble slicing through the laughter. My chest burned as I walked toward the doors, every step heavier than the last. Just as I reached the edge of the room, a hand brushed mine. I looked down to find a sealed envelope pressed into my palm. Uncle Robert, my father's lawyer and brother, leaned close and whispered, "Read it when you're ready." My fingers tore at the paper, the edges ripping under my trembling hands. I pulled out the letter, and as my eyes scanned the first line, my father's glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. For the first time in my life, I saw fear flash across his face. The night wasn't just about his retirement. It was a performance staged to show off his power. Crystal chandeliers glowed above marble floors. A string quartet played in the corner, and every wall boasted framed photos of him shaking hands with governors and CEOs. Guests saw a man of triumph. I saw a tyrant dressing up his legacy. Ethan stood tall in his tailored suit, magnetic as ever, smiling at everyone who approached. My father watched him with pride, his chest swelling. Then his gaze shifted to me, cold, sharp, dismissive. I was the son he tried to erase with words, the mistake he never forgave. And now, with a single letter in my hands, I finally had the power to make him tremble. To most people in that ballroom, my mother looked like grace itself, pearls at her throat, wine glass in hand, a soft smile that never wavered. But I knew better. She had chosen silence years ago, the kind that kept peace in public, but left me standing alone. Maybe she loved me quietly, but she never once stood between me and my father's cruelty. I was standing near the dessert table when Uncle Robert found me. His hand landed firm on my shoulder, grounding me for just a moment. "You holding up, Daniel?" he asked, his voice carrying the kind of weight that didn't need to be loud. I gave him a half smile, the kind that hides more than it says, and shrugged. What could I tell him? That I'd stopped expecting anyone to stand up for me a long time ago. The Hale family was built on a hierarchy as rigid as stone. Ethan was the golden heir, polished since childhood to inherit the empire. I was the spare, the afterthought, told to be grateful for the scraps left over. Ethan's trophies filled shelves. His face appeared in company newsletters, and every win earned him another round of praise from my father. My wins, books read, hours spent volunteering, songs I wrote, were called weaknesses. My father said they'd get me eaten alive in the real world. I tried to lower my expectations that night. The party was for Ethan, and everyone knew it. Still, some small stubborn part of me wondered, hoped, that my father might acknowledge me, even just a word to prove I wasn't invisible. But as the night dragged on, that hope crumbled. Guests lined up to shake Ethan's hand, spinning stories about his future, his brilliance, his discipline. No one even looked my way. Ethan noticed, of course. He always did. At one point, he leaned close, smiling wide enough for the cameras. "Relax, Danny," he whispered, his tone soaked in mock pity. "Maybe Dad will give you the fishing cabin. You can play guitar out there, live off the grid. Sounds perfect for you." His friends laughed, and I forced a smile because that's what I always did. That was my life. Ethan's jokes, my silence. My father's coldness, my mother's lowered gaze. I survived in the cracks, but survival isn't belonging. And standing in that glittering ballroom, I knew I didn't belong. The orchestra swelled, the room shifting as my father walked toward the stage. My chest tightened. This was the moment, the coronation of Ethan Hale. The reminder to everyone, including me, that I was nothing but an accident in someone else's story. My father tapped his glass against the microphone. The chatter vanished instantly. Richard Hale didn't have to demand silence. It came to him naturally, like even the air recognized his authority. The chandelier light caught the silver in his hair as he looked over the crowd, the titan on his throne. Tonight, he began, voice steady, commanding, we celebrate more than my retirement. We celebrate the legacy of Hale Enterprises. What began as one man's vision has grown into a company worth $95 million. He spread his arms, soaking in the admiration. And this, his eyes found Ethan, standing tall near the stage, chin lifted, chest proud. This is the future. The cheers hit like a wave. Glasses raised high, faces glowing with awe. And me, standing in the shadows, reminded again of exactly who I was, the son who didn't count. My eldest son, Ethan, my father announced, his voice swelling with pride, is the man I trust to carry this company forward. He has the strength, the discipline, the intelligence to protect what we've built and to make it greater. Tonight, I hand him the keys to the kingdom. The company is his. The estate is his. Even the jet is his. Ethan Hale is the future. Applause exploded across the ballroom. Some people rose to their feet, clapping harder, cheering louder. Ethan flashed his winning smile, shaking hands like a politician closing the deal of his life. Cameras clicked as he clasped my father's hand firmly. Father and son standing shoulder to shoulder, as if the moment had been rehearsed 100 times. I stayed frozen in my chair. None of this was unexpected, but the sharpness of it still cut deep. My chest ached as I watched them bask in the glow of their triumph. Then my father's gaze shifted. The pride drained from his face. His voice hardened. And as for my other son, Daniel, he let the pause stretch, the silence pressing heavy over the room. You get nothing. The words slammed into me. Glasses stilled midair. Conversation died. His next words fell like a blade. You were never supposed to be born. I wish you hadn't lived past your first day. For a moment, silence held. Then laughter trickled in, scattered, uneasy at first, before swelling into something cruel. People chuckled. Some clapped as if his cruelty were part of the act. Ethan laughed the hardest, his voice cutting above the rest, feeding on my humiliation. I couldn't breathe. My face burned. My ears rang. My mother lowered her eyes to her glass, retreating into the only armor she knew, silence. I wanted to shout, to tell him his words wounded deeper than the loss of money or mansions ever could. But my throat locked. Silence was all I had left. I pushed back my chair. The scrape of wood against marble drew every eye. My legs felt like lead as I walked toward the exit, their laughter swirling around me like smoke. Ethan's voice followed, sharp with mockery. Don't be so sensitive, little brother. Maybe Dad will let you keep your guitar. More laughter, more stabs on my back. I kept my head low, determined to leave with what scraps of dignity I could carry. Then, just before the doors, a hand slipped something into mine, a sealed envelope. I turned to find Uncle Robert standing there, his expression firm, unreadable. Don't walk away just yet, he murmured. This is from someone who wanted you to know the truth. Shame and confusion battled inside me. My hands trembled as I gripped the envelope. Part of me wanted to shove it in my pocket and disappear, but something in Robert's eyes told me it mattered. It wasn't a gesture. It was a key. Behind me, the laughter had already shifted back to celebration. My father's voice rose in another toast, as though I had never existed. My humiliation still hung thick in the air, but in my hands, I held something heavier, Something dangerous. I turned back toward the stage, toward the man who had built his empire on power and cruelty. For years, I had accepted my role as the unwanted son. But now, for the first time, I held a weapon. My pulse pounded as I slid a finger under the seal. If I was going to be humiliated tonight, I wasn't leaving quietly. If this envelope carried the truth Robert promised, then I would open it right there, in front of them all. That choice, to stay instead of walk away, wasn't planned. It was born from rage, shame, and something else I hadn't felt in years: defiance. The envelope in my hand felt like it weighed 10 pounds. The gold seal caught the chandelier light, taunting me, daring me to open it. Behind me, the party rolled on as if my father's cruelty had been entertainment for the night. Glasses clinked, laughter carried across the room, and the quartet played a polished tune. My brother stood in the middle of it all, basking in his coronation, his grin wide as he shook hands and accepted praise. My father soaked up the admiration with him, his chest puffed like a king handing down a crown. I stood at the edge of the ballroom, staring at the envelope, hearing Robert's words echo in my head. Don't walk away yet. This is from someone who wanted you to know the truth. For years, I had been silent. When my father cut me down, I swallowed it. When Ethan mocked me, I let it slide. When my mother lowered her eyes, I told myself I didn't need her defense. But this time, something inside me cracked open. I walked back to my seat. A few guests noticed and smirked, as though amused that I couldn't resist slinking back. Ethan leaned close, his voice just loud enough for nearby tables. Couldn't stay away, huh? Maybe Dad will let you sweep out the hangar where the jet's parked. His friends laughed on cue. This time, I didn't flinch. I stared straight at him until his grin faltered. My silence wasn't surrender anymore. It was sharpening. I set the envelope on the table. My mother's eyes flicked toward it, then dropped quickly back to her wine. My father spotted the gesture from the stage. What's that, Daniel? A sympathy card. His laugh rippled through the crowd. I ignored him. My hands were steady now. I broke the seal, the sound tearing through the quiet around me. Inside was thick stationery, my grandfather's name pressed into the top, followed by several stamped documents I didn't yet understand. My chest pounded as I unfolded the letter and saw the first line. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't dismissive. It was meant for me. I stood. Conversations began to taper off as people noticed. My father's voice wavered mid-sentence. "What are you doing?" he demanded, that iron confidence cracking just slightly. I held the letter up. "You wanted a spectacle," I said, my voice carrying farther than I expected. "Fine. Then let's hear the truth." The laughter stopped. The quartet's music cut short. Even the clinking of glasses fell silent. Ethan muttered, forcing a laugh. He's just trying to make a scene. But the crowd wasn't with him anymore. Their eyes were on me. I cleared my throat, unfolded the paper fully, and read aloud the first line. "To my grandson, Daniel Hale." Gasps swept through the room. My father's glass slipped in his hand. Ethan's smirk crumbled. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the invisible son. I was the one holding the truth. If you are reading this, it means my time has ended, and the truth I wanted known has been hidden. I founded Hale Industries with the belief that it should be led not by the loudest or the most ruthless, but by the one who carries integrity. That man is you, Daniel. The ballroom rippled with gasps and murmurs. My father shot to his feet, hand raised sharply. "Enough. Sit down." But I didn't stop. My voice carried stronger than I thought possible. This letter is accompanied by signed legal documents transferring controlling shares of Hale Industries to me. Grandfather Richard Edmund Hale wrote this so no one could twist his wishes. He made it clear I, not Ethan, was chosen to inherit the company. The air shifted. Conversations hushed into sharp whispers. Eyes darted between me, my father, and Ethan. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the shadow son in the corner. All attention was fixed on me. My father's glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the marble floor. Champagne pooled at his feet. His face drained of color, his chest rising and falling too fast. For the first time in decades, the unshakable Richard Hale looked afraid. Uncle Robert stepped forward, his voice even but commanding. "These are binding documents. Richard, you know it as well as I do. Your father made his wishes crystal clear." I held the papers high. "For years, you told me I was nothing. Tonight, the truth speaks for itself." The room fell silent. Even the musicians in the corner stopped mid-note. The only sound was the faint drip of champagne from the broken glass. Richard Hale's carefully crafted mask cracked in front of his empire. Ethan broke the silence with a sharp laugh that rang hollow. He shoved his way toward me, jabbing a finger at the papers. "This is a joke. Some old letter dragged out to embarrass us. Dad, tell them it's worthless." My father opened his mouth, but his voice faltered. These are lies." The tremor in his tone betrayed him. Robert didn't flinch. He reached into his briefcase and produced another folder. "This," he said, holding it high, "is a notarized directive from Edmund Hale himself, witnessed by myself and 2 independent parties. It confirms the transfer of controlling shares of Hale Industries to Daniel Hale upon Richard Hale's retirement. The decision is final. The company belongs to him." Gasps swept the room. Guests who had once chuckled at my humiliation now leaned forward, whispering urgently. The weight of the evening shifted in my favor. Ethan's face burned red. He lunged toward me, snatching for the papers. "This is fraud. I've given my entire life to this company. Everyone knows I'm the rightful heir." I yanked the documents back before his hands touched them. "Spending your life preparing for something doesn't mean you deserve it. Grandfather saw through you. He knew the arrogance you carried. That's why he chose me." The words hit him hard. His smirk collapsed, his jaw tightening. His voice rose, desperate now. "He's a nobody. He hides in books and music while I build a future for this company. He's soft. He's weak. He's unfit to run anything." Before I could answer, Robert's voice cut through the air like a blade. "You can argue all night, Ethan, but this isn't about opinions. It's about law, and the law is on Daniel's side." My father staggered, gripping the podium for balance. His eyes flicked from the papers to me, then to the guests watching with wide-eyed fascination. For a man who had built his life on pride and dominance, Richard Hale suddenly looked cornered, small, even. I lifted my grandfather's letter higher, my voice steady, resolute. "The Hale legacy does not belong to those who claim it through arrogance or intimidation. Tonight, it belongs to me." The room erupted, not in laughter, not in mockery, but in stunned silence that told me the balance of power had shifted forever. My grandfather's words rang through the ballroom like a verdict. "Do not let cruelty define you as it has defined your father. The empire I built was meant to raise people up, not grind them down. I give it to you, Daniel, because you have compassion. Do not squander it." The echo of his voice lingered, though he had been gone for years. Conversations broke out in hushed tones. Some nodded, as if the letter confirmed what they had long suspected about my father's ruthlessness. Others stared at me with new eyes. No longer the overlooked son, but someone chosen. My father finally erupted. His voice cracked under the strain. "I built this empire. My sweat, my blood, my sacrifices. And you mean to hand all to him? A boy who never wanted it. A mistake that never should have been born." His words spilled into a shout, spit flying as he pointed at me. "I will not let this happen." But the room had shifted. The respect he once commanded was gone. The guests no longer looked at him with admiration. They looked at him with unease, with pity, with judgment. His rage stripped away the mask he had worn for decades, leaving bitterness raw and exposed. I stepped forward, my voice steady. "You can't stop it. Grandfather made sure of that. You can call me weak, you can call me a mistake, but tonight, in front of everyone you try to impress, the truth stands taller than you do. You never had the final word. He did. Ethan lunged, but two of my father's closest associates held him back. Their faces were pale. They had seen enough to know where the tide had turned. Silence fell again as I slid the papers back into their envelope and held it tightly against my chest. For the first time, I felt the weight of belonging, not because I had defeated Ethan or silenced my father, but because the man who mattered most had trusted me with everything. Richard Hale collapsed into a chair, his hands covering his face. The titan who once intimidated governors and bent businessmen to his will sat broken before the empire he no longer controlled. At his feet, shards of crystal glinted in the light, reflecting the truth. His reign had ended not in glory, but in humiliation. I lifted my head and looked across the room. Every eye was on me, waiting, measuring. My voice carried strong and clear. My name is Daniel Hale. I am the heir to Hale Industries. And from this night forward, things will change. A ripple swept through the crowd. Some clapped, cautious but sincere. Others whispered furiously among themselves. But all of them understood. The world they had walked into that evening was not the same as the one they would leave. I stood tall, my father broken beside me, Ethan seething with rage, and my mother watching with tears in her eyes. For years, I had lived under their shadow. But now, I carried the truth in my hands, and the room would never return to what it had been before I opened that envelope. The laughter that once mocked me was gone. In its place was silence, heavy and undeniable. My father stared at the glass on the floor as though he could will it back together. Ethan paced like a caged animal, his fists clenched, his eyes searching desperately for approval that would never come again. His voice rose, desperate and hollow. This cannot be the end. I am the one who earned it. But no one moved to support him. The words fell flat against the weight of the truth. And then Margaret Hale, my mother, who had spent years sitting silently through storms she could never stop, rose slowly from her chair. Every gaze turned to her as she stepped into the center of the room, her voice soft but unshakable. For the first time, she spoke into the storm. She walked toward me, her steps unhurried but certain, and when she reached me, she took my hand in both of hers. Her eyes shimmered with tears, and her voice came soft enough that only I could hear. Your grandfather was right about you. Those words, quiet as they were, cut deeper than any applause ever could. For the first time in years, I felt her choose me. Not Ethan, not my father, me. The grandeur of the evening had collapsed into something else entirely. Guests who had laughed at my humiliation earlier now shuffled toward me with handshakes and murmured congratulations, eager to be seen aligning with the man holding the future of Hale Industries. I accepted their words with polite nods, but let them slide off me. I had lived too long under the weight of fickle praise to mistake it for loyalty. When the ballroom finally thinned, I stayed near the stage with my grandfather's letter still in hand. I read his words again in silence. They weren't just about wealth or power. They were about a legacy meant to be carried differently. He hadn't chosen me because I was loud or ruthless. He had chosen me because I had compassion, because I saw people as more than pawns in a game. He had recognized something my father had refused to see. It struck me then. This night wasn't about proving Richard Hale wrong. It was about proving to myself that I was never the mistake he insisted I was. For years, I had carried the weight of believing my existence was a burden. But tonight, truth had given me something no one could ever strip away, belonging. My father sat in silence for the rest of the night, staring at the glass shards scattered across the marble floor as though he could glue them back together and undo what had happened. Ethan stormed out, his curses echoing down the hall, his fury filling the space my father's silence left behind. My mother remained at my side, quiet but present, her hand brushing mine every so often as though to reassure herself I was real. Uncle Robert came forward and rested his hand firmly on my shoulder. His voice was steady, almost ceremonial. "It's time you stepped into what was always meant for you." I nodded, though I knew the road ahead wouldn't be simple. Taking the helm of Hale Industries would come with challenges. Resistance, doubt, eyes waiting for me to falter. But I also knew one thing with certainty. I would not lead as my father had. Fear and cruelty would not be the foundation I built upon. Mine would be different. Mine would be stronger. Integrity. The lesson of that night wasn't only about inheritance. It was about truth. You could try to bury it, twist it, laugh in its face, but truth always finds its moment to rise. My father spent years convincing me I was nothing. My grandfather's words reminded me I had always been something. And in that reminder, I found the strength to step forward without shame. So when I tell this story now, I don't tell it as the humiliated son who finally got his revenge. I tell it as a man who learned that cruelty cannot erase your worth, not when you're rooted in truth. If you hear anything from this, let it be this. You may feel small in someone else's shadow. You may be told you don't belong, but your worth isn't defined by their voices. It's defined by who you are when the truth finally comes to light. And on that night, standing in the ruins of my father's pride, I finally understood I was never the mistake. I was the choice.